All right, it is the top of the hour. It looks like we have a number of people still joining, but I will go ahead and get started with the kind of introduction part of today's presentation so we can get to the more meatier section. Um, we appreciate you joining today's webinar, How Fruit of the Loom Streamline Records Management. My name is Shayna Horka and I work in product marketing, and I will be acting as the host of this webinar. And before we get started on introducing the other speakers, I have a couple of housekeeping items to go through and then a couple of slides to tell you a little bit about Gimmal. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them in the chat section, and we will answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. But this will be more of a conversationalist type of webinar, so we may answer some if they're relevant to the topic at hand live. This presentation will be recorded and available to view after the live event. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. So to kick things off, just a couple of slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Gimmal is an information governance software company founded in 2002. And our mission is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with our key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to help you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration from legacy systems, file analysis and e-discovery, electronic and physical records management, and document management for SAP content. Without further ado, on the next slide, I'd like to introduce you to the speakers on this call. From Gimmal's side, and I'm sure most of the attendees on this call have had an opportunity to meet this presenter before, we have Vice Chairman David Quackenbush. We are also excited to be joined by Fruit of the Loom's records manager and longtime client, Mark Kickbusch. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to David so he can get started with today's presentation.
Thank you, Shayna. Much appreciated. And thanks to everyone for joining this afternoon. I think you're going to find this to be a very interesting session. We are incredibly proud and excited to have our long-standing client, Fruit of the Loom, to talk about some of the experiences that they've had going through their records management journey. And Mark Kickbusch has been an integral part of that project and that activity for many years. A little backdrop on the Fruit of the Loom story just to get things started, and then we'll go into our conversation. Back in 2016, 2017 timeframe, Fruit of the Loom decided to really create a long-term information governance and records management roadmap to really outline and kind of establish a consistent but an adoptable approach to managing records across the Fruit of the Loom enterprise. And it's a large company. They have multiple brands, multiple locations, physical and electronic records. The electronic records were stored in many locations. They were moving more towards a standardization around SharePoint and Microsoft 365, which is a common theme for many of our clients. So that journey began with laying down that what is our information governance story going to be from a policy governance perspective. What tools are we going to use to manage records and manage content in the enterprise consistently, and do so in a way that actually attains our goals and also achieves high user adoption in the newly deployed solutions, so that records is really something that happens and isn't a daily part of everybody's life getting other work done at Fruit of the Loom. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right in and welcome Mark again. Mark, how are you? Good to talk to you again.
Hey, David, great to be here.
It might be helpful to give everyone a quick background before we jump into the first question on your background with Fruit of the Loom and experience, and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, obviously, for those that don't know, I grew up in Australia, moved over here a number of years ago. Sort of fell into records management, working for a law enforcement in their records department. And then nearly 4 years ago, I came to Fruit of the Loom and became the records manager. And they were just starting to get on board with Gimmal. At the beginning of 2018, I came on, and we've been moving towards bringing Fruit of the Loom onto a better platform to be able to create and manage all their records and information. So that's a little bit of me. I was a policeman and a detective in Australia for 10 years prior to coming here as well. So.
Oh, very good. Thank you. I guess being a detective makes you qualified to be excellent at records management than having to find all this content in the enterprise and determine what it is.
Yeah, I thought I was, Dave, but I struggle with that even. So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. So the first one is a nice, big, broad topic. But since you've been in this role, what are the challenges that you faced in implementing a modern records management solution at Fruit?
Yeah, the biggest thing with anyone especially anyone on this call, with the organizations creating so much data, but if it's left unmanaged, it just becomes a nightmare to deal with. So, and as David mentioned, in about 2016, Fruit of the Loom assessed their current records management system and saw they really didn't have one, and made the executive decision that they needed to increase their capacity to deal with their records. So they undertook a major pivot in the way in which they were overseeing records management and created a project to bring the company to another level. They reached out to Gimmal and had them come in and consult a number of internal departments and learn what improvements needed to be made and in what areas. So once this had occurred, Fruit set about implementing new processes, some policies and procedures, and as a measure to make sure that the company would be better equipped to handle records management and information governance. And then I was hired on just at the start of this and have worked closely with my team and Gimmal to implement a new records management program.
Excellent. As y'all have gone through this so far in the journey to date, are there things that sort of stand out at you that you encountered so far along the way that you'd say, I wish I would have known about that, or I wish we would have had a different way of handling that problem?
Oh, definitely. Like, as they say, the experience is something you gain just after you needed it. So just as you like, the big thing for us was migration, and having it come from the top down. Most organizations work exactly the same. If it doesn't come from the top down, you really struggle to gain any traction. So that was one thing that we did benefit from. But the big thing I'd say was our migration of just getting people to clean up their existing repositories prior to actually trying to migrate. And we've started to do that a lot better, and we've seen just it become more streamlined. So that's one thing I can't stress enough to people is clean up your old content before you try and migrate things.
Wow, couldn't have said it better myself. That's one of the things that we obviously promote. It'd be great to, I'm going to go off script a little bit, but just be great to get a little bit more on how you got people to do their own migration and cleanup. What was that experience like?
Well, we ended up obviously getting everyone to nominate their paths to their repositories, because most companies that I work with have shared drives and everyone's got folders upon folders, and over time everyone wants to keep everything. Well, that's not records management, that's called hoarding. Yeah. And it gets to a point where when someone leaves, well, whose responsibility is it to clean up their folders and things like that? So you have this just 20-year like closet to clean up, to put it in perspective. And we finally got to a point where we were able to narrow that down by asking everyone, nominate where you keep your content, because if you don't need it now and you haven't accessed it for 5 years, I don't think we need it. And that's not saying everything, but it was a good start.
Yeah, great advice. Was gaining adoption for that. So this question sort of dovetails into this slide here, but you mentioned top-down support previously when we were talking about the beginning of this program. Did that really help drive people to take action on those things where they're like, I'm not sure if I need this or not, so I don't know what to do?
Oh, massively, David. And that's the big thing too, because a lot of people need to know, well, what's in it for me? Like, why am I doing this? Like, because it seems like I'm going to be doing your job for you. Like, if I just clean up, it's like, shouldn't you do that? But you need to explain to people that I want to work smarter, not harder. And with all the, especially these days with, privacy, with legislative requirements, you need to like stress the importance of information governance to people, because it's an overlooked area in a lot of businesses. Everyone, as I said before, everyone keeps everything because that's just their mentality. Like, I don't want to delete something. What happens if I need that? And so it was great. And we're doing it at the moment with our CFO, and he's been phenomenal, like leading from the front saying, hey, what do you need from me? And so his group has seen him doing it. And now everyone's like, well, he's on this, so I need to just show that I'm working as well towards our goal. So, but as I said, for any change to be effective in any organization, it does need to be a top-down decision. And if you do not have buy-in from your executives and you struggle to achieve any real change, and that was one of the things when I came on board, the team had been assembled already, and I'd find my feet really quickly. And luckily, as you can probably tell, I am a bit of a extrovert, don't mind a chat with people. And apparently I've been told I talk funny too, so that always helps. So, and the other thing that is imperative is to identify the key stakeholders that the changes will affect the most. Make sure that there's an open line of communication between these people. Change can be scary for a lot of people. And you just need to really reassure people that the changes will ultimately assist them in doing their job while keeping the company compliant with a record retention schedule and any other legislative requirements.
Yeah, excellent. I think change management is huge, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think it's also interesting that your CFO has been a great advocate for making all this happen. Those are pretty critical in our view. In addition to that, what roles did you guys have to create new roles within Fruit of the Loom to make your program move forward from a records perspective?
Yeah, they never had any records management. Like, they had an internal auditor do it like as a part-time. And that's when I came on board. So at the recommendation of Gimmal, actually, to create a position that oversees records and information management. So that's what I've done. And it's been great so far. And we've got so much positive feedback because it's not a sexy subject, records management. Like, let's be honest. It's like no one wants to do it. But I actually enjoy it. And I find the key is just to turn those people who don't like change and assure them that literally it's going to be okay. You're going to be able to function. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I honestly, at one point in time, I can't remember when it was, we might have published a white paper, or we might have talked about this in another webinar. But, one of the things that kind of saw in the future is that the records managers of today are the people that have had that title and are migrating to more complex titles like information governance and also like that, are also really probably going to be the best position to be change agents in organizations as well, because it does represent that, but you've got to be able to communicate effectively and like you mentioned, be able to provide people the what's in it for them part of that story. So good stuff. Moving right along. So when you first started looking at solutions like ours, I think I know the answer to this question, but what kind of goals and objectives were you using in the process of trying to identify what were you going to be using to, from a technology perspective, to start building this foundation for records going forward?
Well, as you said, it was definitely an educational process. So we were looking for different options, and after seeing the Gimmal's records management, it just ticked all the boxes. Like, it has the SaaS environment, which we moved to, which has been phenomenal for us. The ability to lock records down so that they can't be modified or changed, and almost create like a defensible records management program. Because at the moment, and when I came on board, I was just shocked, not by just Fruit, but just in general, that companies don't do this. It's a free for all. Where are company records? Either on so-and-so's OneDrive or they're on someone's desktop. It's like, it's no good from a company point of view when you need to access those records, or if you have to find them, things that need to be held accountable. You need someone to be overseeing that rather than just leave it to all different individuals. So, and Gimmal provided every one of those things, like from their Gimmal record management tool has just been phenomenal.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for that. So is it fair to say when you were going through the exercise and y'all were really starting to move more and more to the Microsoft platform, were there things about that move to Microsoft that caused you to recognize that perhaps there were more things that needed to be done from a records perspective than you were just naturally going to be able to do in the Microsoft environment, whether that's managing physical records or things in file shares or what have you?
Yeah, definitely. And it was just, Microsoft is such a complex, like it's an easy end user, but on the back end, Microsoft seemed to change things left, right, and center. So it always seems to you can't get a good handle on everything in relation to Microsoft. And I just think with the Gimmal tool, it was just really, really a standalone easy decision, because it's a one-stop shop with the physical records management that we've just gone on board with as well, and just the management tool itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's a very powerful platform, but it certainly has its challenges in some areas like that from a complexity perspective. Did kind of hopping back off on the educational process, I wonder, a lot of times what we've seen is, nobody wants to build a new records management program, or for that matter, any kind of new system every couple of years. Did anything that you went through in trying to determine what the platform of the future was going to look like, did that help shape any of the future technology decisions you're making it for the Loom overall?
Yeah, it definitely did, because when we talked to IT as well with this, we wanted something that had at least a longevity looking towards the future, not just something that looks great now, but how's it going to play, and is it going to be compatible with new things coming out? And it just seems that Gimmal was able to work with a lot of different entities. And after seeing it in action, seeing the demos, and then using it, I've seen everything come to fruition.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's awesome. So let's kind of shift track a little bit and talk about, I'm not sure that this question is exactly the way I wanted to describe it, but it was a good starting point. It's like, now that you've been on this path of implementing a records management program, have you been able to start to quantify any of the results you've seen? Are y'all doing disposition yet, or are there other things that you're doing that are really starting to take hold and people are seeing some of the benefits of the change?
Yeah, massively. We've been able to quickly identify our content. I think that's the biggest issue. Now with everything, the way I've set it up in Gimmal is it matches perfectly to our record retention schedule. So they work in tandem, because as everyone knows in records management, if you don't have a good retention schedule, then you're fighting a losing battle, because you need to have something that governs your record management system. So, and that's what I thought the biggest issue that was solved with Gimmal tool was that company records would be locked down and not able to be changed, like I mentioned before, and they'd be classified properly. All the metadata would be associated, because we're using a SharePoint platform. And that was the primary reason for implementing the GRM tool. Also, the cleanup of rot, or the redundant, obsolete, and trivial within the system. As I said before, if it's left unchecked, it just becomes overwhelming to deal with. And the GRM tool, we really thought fixed a lot of those problems with our WIP and just falling off the system, because how many documents get created that they maybe use for one day, but they sit there and 18 years later, they're still sitting in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
yeah, that's a huge problem for everybody. And again, I think human nature is, once I've created it, I really don't know what to do with it. And I don't really know if I want to delete it, because I might grab a paragraph later from something.
exactly right. And that's what I said. Like, everyone has that, David. Like, everyone has that mentality of, I've got to keep everything just in case I need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, you don't. You really don't. Like,
yeah, no, totally agree with that. So now, let me ask you this question, just out of curiosity. So we've often encountered scenarios where you'll implement Gimmal records, and the client will have thought that their content was in pretty good shape. And so I'll say, and I say their content, mainly like SharePoint content, that they thought they had a good structure and good metadata and things like that. And then started to try to apply the retention schedule to that content and realize there was work to be done. Did y'all encounter anything like that in the early days of the implementation?
Definitely. Like, when we came, when I came on board, I've updated the record retention schedule twice now in 4 years since I've been there. Just always trying to keep on top of it. But exactly right, because if things aren't classified properly, you just have no idea where your content is, because someone creating a document for a purchase something, who knows what else is going to be in that folder or anything. So it did need a lot of work. And that's where, when I was saying about the migration, to migrate all the old stuff over, people had to literally just go into their shared drives and start cleaning things up. And that was the biggest challenge for people, because it was a mammoth task for people to go back and then go, well, I don't know whose this is, because that person left the company 5 years ago. So
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's a common challenge that we see, is that that once you start really applying policy, you learn a lot more about, again, how I should organize my content, and that also affects how to make it much easier for people to use that are doing the day-to-day work. I'm going to skip this question and move on to this one, and then I'm going to come back to that question, because I wanted to touch on this first, which is really, you mentioned it at the beginning, but let's talk a little bit more about change management and the approach that y'all have taken to change management to really get, number one, the change in how people looked at and viewed records, since, as you mentioned, that was something new in the world of Fruit of the Loom, and a new role that they created that brought you into the company, but also how that's affected adoption and the change program, and what it's done to get people to do the right thing, if you will, and or find an easier to use environment as you've built out a kind of next generation system at Fruit of the Loom.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I mentioned before, I'm really comfortable communicating with people, and I find it exciting to explain the benefits of records management, because I believe it's an underappreciated area within most companies, and especially with the way we've gone in 2020. But from my point of view, the biggest issue is to make sure that you have buy-in from the top down. I cannot stress that enough. If you've got buy-in from the top down, you have a better chance of your program being successful. And most companies need those people in position of power to say, hey, this is what we're doing. With classic example, as I gave before, the CFO doing it, everyone under his purview literally was like, oh, we got to do it then. He said, and he's doing it. So, yeah. And I just can't stress enough also to keep in contact with your stakeholders and be very transparent about what's going to take place. Yeah. Explaining the benefits and reasoning for the change is essential to a smooth transition. And letting them know that, hey, there are going to be growing pains. I'm not shying away from that. This isn't sunshine and rainbows. This is going to be some hard work, and there's going to be some frustration. But if you trust in me, I will get you through it. And that's happening.
Yeah, excellent point. The old tell them what you told them, and then tell them again, and really kind of being repetitive so that it sinks in. you can't, there's just no replacing that kind of high level of communication and consistent communication with the people that you're working with that make that work. Were there any things on the change management front? Did you engage your corporate communications department? Were there other tools used to help do that communication, or was it mostly you and your team really going and evangelizing to the organization?
Yeah, it was really our team. We didn't really lean too much on corporate communications, just because we didn't see, because we're doing it in stages, we didn't want it to be like, hey, everyone, we're doing this, and they forget about it because we're not onboarding them for 18 months or something like that. So we were really specific in targeting who we were going to onboard, because I also told our VPs that, hey, if the first one doesn't go well, you've really got to be careful because you can shoot yourself in the foot, because obviously the grapevine of the workplace is a magical and crucifying place all at once. So if it goes well, it can be a best ally, or if it doesn't, it can really cruel you.
Yeah, you're right about that. I figured you being a police officer and a detective might have helped with that part, but and the fact that you're a big guy as well. But
luckily, I'm friendly, David. I'm friendly.
So I'm going to jump to our last question here, but one of the things that kind of jumped in my head when you were talking about the change management elements and things is and you mentioned COVID. Did anything happen during the kind of early parts of COVID and what have you, and the lockdowns and all the business like that, that caused you to rethink anything you were doing from a records perspective, or did it accelerate the company's view that it needed to be a more important part of the journey, or anything like that?
About the only good thing to come out of 2020 and COVID was it actually highlighted that what we were doing was the right thing to be doing, because it accentuated in COVID that we need to have collaboration sites. Things need to be electronic. We don't have the capability in COVID to just print something out and take it to someone's office next door. So we have to be able to collaborate. We have to keep our records central, not just on your own silo. Because if, as I said, if COVID taught us anything, we don't want to email something 48 times and end up with 48 different versions. We want to have one place everyone's working from and knows where their content is.
Yeah, excellent point. So, so just kind of branching off of that, then really the final big question here is, you've been 3 years into this journey. It's a journey. There's not an end point. It's got to maintain its own life going forward. But do you have any recommendations, lessons learned that the audience could benefit from in terms of what you've gone through so far in your journey?
Oh, I've learned so many things. I don't know how to quantify it like in this short space of time, but I guess the biggest challenge was being new, was being from outside. I was so lucky to be able to communicate with so many people. And I guess if I could stress to anyone on this call is take ownership and communicate, because we know what we're doing in the records management world. But just like if we had to go into a marketing or a finance, we may not be as comfortable. That's how everyone else in different departments view record management. They think it's old, get rid of it. They have no comprehension of what you have to go through, the destruction authorities you have to gain, things like that. So I just can't stress enough transparency and communication with your stakeholders.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we are approaching the end of our journey here, so I can't thank you enough for joining us in this conversation. Again, Mark, I think our relationship's been a great one, but I think your willingness to participate and talk about some of your experiences here has probably been a huge benefit to the people that have joined our webinar today. We'll flip it over to Shana to see if there's any questions out there and or to wrap things up here for the rest of the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, David. Appreciate it. So I actually didn't see any questions come in, so everybody just probably is very enamored by the conversation. But I did have a, one final question for Mark before we jump. Obviously we have a pretty good relationship with you, Mark. Multiple people on our side. Do you have any recommendations for those on the call when seeking out a vendor and building that kind of relationship so you can make sure you get what you need?
Just be open. Like, your vendors appreciate that. And I sent in a change management request last week. Like, if something's not working, work with your vendor, because they want it to work well so that you can be a shining light for them. Because if they don't help their existing customers, your existing customers aren't going to reach out to others and, portray you in a great light. And I can't speak highly enough of Gimmal, because they are so responsive. Like, I'll give a shout out to Sean Gaffney. He has been phenomenal. Anything we need, he's on the ball, always reaching out, just checking in. But yeah, just my whole working relationship has been great with Gimmal.
Great. And we actually did get, everybody's giving a shout out to Shauna. We actually did get one question in the chat, as well as a couple of thank yous. But did you put anything in place so that records are classified at creation rather than always being in cleanup mode?
100%. The cleanup mode was only for the migration of old content. So when we went live with the new system, everything now has metadata, and its content is classified the moment it's created. So you pick whether it's a policy, procedure, and it's in line with, as I mentioned before, where it falls under the record retention schedule. Doesn't affect how we do it if it's an Excel, a PDF, Word. It's all done in the background by the actual people of their content, and it's just linked to the Gimmal records. So whatever you choose, it may have a retention of 7 years. So the moment you make that document final, it's got 7 years from that moment.
All right, that makes sense. And then there was another one. Did you use any file analysis software to clean up end users, to help end users clean up with or before the migration?
Yes, I think the tool was Active Navigation, and did a crawl. And what that did was literally list out in an Excel document every single document, every bit of metadata, the URL path, everything linked. And some of those were like 40,000. And we got people to go through and clean all that up. And that's why I was saying it was painful. And there were people blowing up. But we told them, it was like, hey, there's only one job you'll ever start at the top at, and that's digging a hole. It's just like this. Like,
That makes sense. Well, I think that concludes the Q&A. Mark, I wanted to just say one more thank you for agreeing to be on the call. If anyone can think of any more questions, our contact information is right there on the screen. If that's too hard to remember, Davey, if you could go to the next and last slide.
Yep.
You can always email us at info@gimmal.com. Visit our website, www.gimmal.com. And for those interested in the recording of this webinar, we will be sending out between 24 and 48 hours in the form of a thank you for registering or attending email. So please keep an eye out. Yes.
Just one other thing. If anyone wants to reach out, please, if I can stop you making any mistakes we did, if you're thinking about this, please reach out, because I'd rather save you pain than just, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you, Mark.
And we hope to see you guys on our next webinar next week. If you're interested, the topic is moving to Google Workspace, what you need to know. But I appreciate you all joining today. And with that, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, David.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Bye.